Hi, how are you? I'm sure you're doing well. My name is Gנון-שילון, and today we are going to talk about the story, Thank You, Ma'am. We will review the story, which is written by Langston Hughes. So let's get it started. Okay, so what are we going to do today? Can you understand the vocabulary used in the story? Can you understand and follow the basic events of the story? Can you answer lots of questions, right? Lower order thinking skills questions. And finally, can you analyze the story using different HOTS skills? So this is what we're going to do today. And we will start with the vocabulary. Now, why do we need vocabulary? Vocabulary is important for several reasons. First, you need vocabulary to understand what you read. Second, you need vocabulary to write, to express yourself. So this is our first assignment for today, basic vocabulary. You need to translate the following words and you have 2 minutes to do it. Let's go over the words together. Ashamed, drag, embarrass, frail, frown, make a dash for it, make a mistake. So you have 2 minutes. Good luck. And we're back. So let's see what you did. Ashamed, drag, embarrass, frail, frown, make a dash for it, and make a mistake. Now we will have more vocabulary, and now we will have only 1 minute to answer, or more specifically, to translate the words. We will go over the words together. Release, shake, snatch, struggle, and trust. So you have 1 minute. Good luck. We're back. Let's check your answers. Release, shake, snatch, struggle, and trust. So these are the words we are going to work with today. Okay, now you are going to watch a short video which is called Everybody Has a Story. Don't judge people too early. This is your guiding question. How does this video connect to our story, Thank You, Ma'am? And the word judge, it means to decide about something or someone. So, enjoy the video. Okay, so you watched a video about people's stories and you saw that we shouldn't judge people too early. Now, how does it connect to the story Thank You, Ma'am? In the story Thank You, Ma'am, Mrs. Luella Bates Washington Jones doesn't judge Roger, right? She gave him a second chance. Through her kindness, she taught him a lesson. Now, she could call the police when he just tried to steal her purse, but she didn't. She took him home, she prepared a meal for him, and then finally she gave him $10 to buy the blue suede shoes he wanted so much. And now we will move on to understanding, basic understanding of the story. Okay, so we will review several questions to see if you understand the basic events in Thank You, Ma'am. Okay, so question number 1. What did the boy try to do? Now, you remember in the beginning of the story, Roger tried to snatch a purse. Okay, next question. Why does the boy lie? Because he was ashamed. Okay, the next one. Where does Mrs. Jones take the boy? To her house. And we mentioned it earlier. We said that she could call the police. They could arrest the boy, but she didn't want to, right? She gave him another chance. Final question. What reason does Mrs. Jones give for not taking Roger to jail? She wants to wash his face. Now, she sees that his face is dirty and she cares for him, right? She knows maybe he doesn't have anyone else to take care of, so she tells him to go and wash his face. Okay, now we are moving to the second set of questions to see if you understand the basic events in the story. Okay, question number 1. Why doesn't Mrs. Jones watch Roger on her purse? She trusts him. Okay, second question. Why does Roger stand far away from the purse? Because he wants Mrs. Jones to trust him. So they share something in common here. Third question. Why doesn't Mrs. Jones ask Roger about himself? She doesn't want to embarrass him, right? She doesn't know where he comes from. That's why she doesn't ask him about his folks, his parents, his family, maybe extended family. Okay, last question. What does Mrs. Jones give Roger and why? So she gives him $10 to buy the blue suede shoes he wanted. Okay, now we will move to lots questions. Now, preparing ourselves for the Bagrut exam, we need to be familiar with different questions. Now, for example, we have lots, which means lower order thinking skills. These are questions that examine your understanding of the content, what happened in the story, etc. Now, we have different types of questions. We have lots, we have hots, and we have bridging. But now, we will focus on lots. Okay, question number 1. What do we know about Roger's life? Now, you remember Roger is the boy who tries to steal Mrs. Jones's purse in the beginning of the story. So what do we know about him? Roger has no one at home to take care of him. He doesn't have money to buy the things he wants, right? That's why he tries to steal Mrs. Jones's purse. He steals from other people. He is poor. He has nobody at home in the evening. He steals from other people. He is an African American, and he lives in a poor neighborhood. Now, the story takes place in Harlem. So we know both Mrs. Jones and Roger are African Americans. And they live in a poor neighborhood. Mrs. Jones is a hardworking woman, and Roger maybe doesn't have someone he can rely on. So that's why he tries to steal. Now we will move to the second question. Okay. What is the first thing that Roger is worried about when he gets to Mrs. Jones' home? Now, let's imagine the scene for a moment, okay? Mrs. Luella Bates Washington Jones drags Roger to her house after he tries to steal her purse, and then they enter the door, right? And she tells him that she wants him to wash his face. So back to our question, what is the first thing that Roger is worried about when he gets to her house? He is worried she is going to call the police, or he was worried to go to jail. Now, I would like to focus on this important point. You remember we talked about that she could call the police. They could arrest the boy. He could have a record, but she didn't want to. She didn't want to destroy his life. That's why she didn't call the police, and he has nothing to worry about when he came to her home. So this was the second question. Now we will read question number 3. Why did the boy sit on the far side of the room? Now you remember, they got to her home and he sat far away from the purse. And she was preparing something to eat in the kitchenette. Again, back to our question. So why did he sit far away from the purse or far side of the room? Now we have different options. The most comfortable chair was there. Mrs. Jones told him to sit there. He was near the purse that he wanted to steal, or he was far away from the purse he wanted to steal, and that's the correct answer. He wanted to gain her trust, so he sat far away from the purse. Okay, so these were lots of questions, And now we will move on to the second type, which is called extended HOTS questions. Now, extended HOTS questions, first of all, HOTS means higher order thinking skills questions. We want to see how can you analyze the story using HOTS skills. Now we have several skills, okay? And we will start with how do you approach an extended HOTS question? How can you answer? Now, you have to be very specific, you have to be thorough, and you need to do it following these stages or these steps. Okay, so stage number 1. Name the HOTS you chose to answer the question. Now, as you can see, we have different HOTS. We have inferring, we have comparing and contrasting, we have explaining cause and effect. So the first step, you need to name. Thinking skill I chose is. The second step, you need to use the vocabulary that is directly connected to the chosen HOTS. For example, if I chose inferring, I would integrate 2 or 3 words taken from the vocabulary which is directly connected to this chosen HOTS. Okay, so let's sum up. When you answer an extended HOTS question, you need 1, to name the HOT you chose, 2, choose 2 or 3 words taken from the vocabulary which is connected to the chosen HOTS, and integrate it into your answer. So we will read the first question, and you will have 3 minutes to answer. Question number 1. Mrs. Jones tells Roger, I have done things too which I wouldn't tell you, son. Everybody's got something in common. How does this quote change our opinion of Mrs. Jones? Give information from the story to support your answer. Now, we will have a break and you will have to answer the question. We will check it together. Bye. back. So, you had to answer a question using the HOTS skills. Now let's read the question one more time. Mrs. Jones tells Roger, I have done things too, which I wouldn't tell you, son. Everybody's got something in common. How does this quote change our opinion of Mrs. Jones? Give information from the story to support your answer. Now, let me remind you, when you answer an extended HOTS question, you need to follow 2 stages. The first one, you need to name the HOTS you choose. Second stage, you need to use or integrate the vocabulary which is directly connected to the HOTS you chose. So let's check your answer. Okay, question number 1. So first of all, the thinking skill I chose is comparing and contrasting. Now, look at the banana and the orange, right? Both of them are fruit, okay? But they are different in terms of color, shape, etc. So we will read the answer. This quote helps me to compare between Mrs. Jones and Roger. She was not different from Roger when she was young. Mrs. Jones changed her life, and Roger can also change his life. Now, let me analyze what I did here. Now, in my answer, I integrated the words, the vocabulary that are connected, the words that are connected to the specific HOTS. Here, for example, we have comparing and contrasting. So I use the word compare when I talk about Mrs. Jones as opposed to Roger. And I use the word different, right? She was not different from Roger when she was young. Now, do you remember in the story, she tells him that when she was young, she also wanted things she couldn't get. However, as opposed to Roger, unlike Roger, she didn't steal people's bags, purses, pocketbooks. So Mrs. Jones changed her life, and she wants Roger to change his life as well. So again, we used the HOTS, comparing and contrasting, and when we wrote an answer, we integrated the vocabulary which is directly connected to comparing and contrasting. I used the word compare and different. Now you have more than 2 options. You can use other words as well, as long as it emphasizes the message, the idea you want to convey. So let's move on to our second question. Question number 2. Now, I will give you 3 minutes to answer the question. We will read the question together. Why do you think the story is called Thank You, Ma'am? Give information from the story to support your answer. Now, you need to choose HOTS, a specific HOTS skill, and integrate the vocabulary that is connected to the HOTS you chose within your answer. So you have 3 minutes to do it. Good luck. we're back. So let's read the question one more time, and then we will check your answers. Why do you think the story is called Thank You, Ma'am? Give information from the story to support your answer. Now, before we move to the answer, let's review some things from the story. Important information. Now, you remember the reason for the name of the story. I mean, we don't know why the story is called Thank You, Ma'am, right? It is not explicitly mentioned. It is implicitly, and we need to understand, reading between the lines, why Langston Hughes named the story Thank You, Ma'am. So let's check your answer. Okay, so first of all, I chose the thinking skill inferring. Now, inferring, look at the image we have, okay? Let's see what inferring means. If someone is smiling, we can infer she is happy. If someone is crying, we can infer she is sad. If someone is yawning, we can infer he is sleepy. It means it's not explicitly written and we have to infer it, okay? So I chose inferring to answer the question why the story is called Thank You, Ma'am. Let me read the answer. I can infer that the story is called Thank You, Ma'am because Roger is thankful that the woman, Mrs. Luella Bates Washington Jones, gave him a chance to change his life. Now you remember, going back to the beginning of the story, she could call the police. They could arrest him. He could have a record, but she didn't do it. She didn't want to destroy his life. We are talking about a teenager. He's probably 15 years old, and he doesn't need a record, right? He needs to understand that he did something that is wrong, and he needs to change it. Going back to the answer, I wrote, I can learn that the woman cared for him, gave him money, and didn't call the police, and he thanked her to that. So she took him to her home, she prepared a meal, and finally she gave him the money he needed to buy the blue suede shoes he wanted. So let's analyze what we did here. You had a question, you answered it with the thinking skill that is called inferring. Inferring is when something is not explicitly stated in the text, right? You can't see it. You need to read between the lines, understand it from the context. Now, in our situation, I used two words or the following vocabulary, which is directly connected to the HOTS inferring. And I use the following words: infer, in the beginning, I can infer that, and also in the end of my answer, I used I can learn that. Now, how did I connect it to the story? I gave examples, right? She took care of him, and she didn't call the police. So, now, after this lesson, you can understand the vocabulary used in the story. So you remember we started a lesson with several words that are used in the story, and we mentioned, why do you need to learn the vocabulary? Well, we need vocabulary to understand the story, right? What happens in the story? What is the story? What do we know about Roger, about Mrs. Luella Bates Washington Jones, about the context within which they live, right? They live in a poor neighborhood. She's a hard-working woman, and he's 15 years old. He's a young boy. He probably doesn't have someone who supports him or takes care of him. And we are familiar with the vocabulary you need to understand, to read the story, to answer the questions, understand and follow the basic events of the story. Let me clarify it for a moment. These are, or I chose, the most important events in Thank You, Ma'am. In the beginning, when he tried to steal her purse, right? And then when she took him to her home, she fed him. She told him to wash his face. And then finally, she gave him money to buy the shoes he wanted so badly. And we also learn how to answer Lot's questions. Now, do you remember Lot's means lower order thinking skills questions? These are questions that deal with the context. What happened in the story? Who are the characters? What is the setting? And finally, we analyze the story using different HOTS skills. Now, for this lesson, I chose two extended HOTS skills. One, I used comparing and contrasting, right? When we talk about Roger as opposed to Mrs. Jones, we understand that they are different because when Mrs. Jones was younger, she didn't steal, although she wanted to, right? She wanted things she couldn't have. However, Roger tried to steal her purse, right? Because he needed money to buy the shoes he wanted. Now, for comparing and contrasting, we used the vocabulary that is directly connected to the HOTS, comparing and contrasting. We used different and we used compare. And then we had another question about the name of the story. Thank you, ma'am. And we used a different HOTS called inferring. Inferring is when we need to read between the lines. Something is not explicitly stated. We need to understand it from the context. So we understand that the story is called Thank You, Ma'am, because Mrs. Jones didn't judge Roger. You remember the video we watched? She didn't judge him. She could call the police because he committed a crime. He tried to steal her purse. He could have a record, but she didn't want it. She wanted to teach him a lesson, and she did it through her kindness. She brought him to her home, she fed him, and she gave him money. She helped him. And he understands that he needs to change his behavior. So we used inferring, and we integrated the vocabulary that is connected to this specific HOTS. We used infer and learn. So thank you for joining me today. Bye.